Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. I'm Liza, I'm the account director at BookPal, and I'm in charge of the publisher and author services. I'm here today with
Michelle. I'm the manager of marketing here at BookPal, and I'm in charge of managing the content, our blog, and our social media pages.
and our webinars. And today we're going to talk about mindset, 3 ways to change your mindset to improve results in business and life.
All right, so let's go ahead and begin. We have a little test for you here. We have 2 statements on the screen. Statement A, no matter who you are, you can significantly change your intelligence level. And statement B, you can learn new things, but you can't really change your intelligence. So looking at those 2 statements, think about which statement you agree with more. All right, so now we're going to tell you what this means.
Okay, so 2 types of mindsets that Dr. Dweck talks about in her book. The statement B reflects a fixed mindset. That is the belief that your qualities are carved in stone. If you have something, you have it, you were born with it. If you don't have it, you don't have it. A reflects a growth mindset statement. There's a belief here that your qualities are things you can cultivate through effort, you can grow, and your true potential is actually unknowable. And as Dweck mentions in the book, you can actually have different mindsets about different things. And some things you may think this is fixed, some things you may think I can grow here. So it's kind of malleable.
Exactly. So for those of you who chose or agreed with statement B, not to worry, because we have good news. You can change your mindset, because mindsets are just beliefs. And for those of you who agreed with the growth mindset, then great, because you will learn all about the benefits of continuing with this mindset. Now, let's go ahead and, before we talk about more about the mindsets, Liza, when you first read chapter 1, which mindset did you resonate with?
You know, I thought that some things like, say things like public speaking or things like cooking, those are things I could improve upon. I could get better at that. But things like math, for example, that's something that's sort of coded into me. I'm not good at that. You know, it's not a skill that I have. I have skills in other things, but not that. What about you?
I felt I had a growth mindset when it came to my education, my intelligence, and my growth in my career. I always felt that you can learn more and change and adapt. But when it came to sports, I've always felt that either you have it or you don't. You have the skill or you don't. And when it came to a lot of sports, I did not have the skill. So I never really tried.
Well, I think you'll get better at curling if you try, Michelle. You just need to switch.
Yeah, I think that might be my new passion. Yeah. All right. So let's take a look at some of the problems with having a fixed mindset. So first of all, because you believe that your intelligence and your talent is innate, it creates this urgency to prove yourself over and over, to prove that you are intelligent, to prove that you have talent. And what this means is, for example, in school, tests and grades can be very scary because that defines whether you're smart or not. And in sports, you have to win, because if you don't, then you're a failure. And in business, you have to be the best and you have to make the most money in order to be successful, or you're not successful. And going along with business, there's this thing called the CEO disease. And basically what that means is a CEO or a president who reigns from atop of a pedestal and wants to be seen as perfect, and they don't ever want to change and improve. And you can see how that would be a problem if you have a leader of a company who doesn't want to change.
Yeah, this leads to the third point, which is people start to believe they are special, superior, and it leads to entitlement. People who have the fixed mindset in a really severe manner, they think that they are better than others because they are smart and talented because they are born with it. It's part of who they are. On the flip side, though, failure is also part of your identity. It transforms an action into who you actually feel like you are. For example, taking the bar exam. If you pass, therefore you are meant to be a lawyer. If you fail, you don't, or you are not meant to be a lawyer. So this isn't really a recipe for success. People who start feeling like this or feel, that they're really attached to this fixed mindset, they don't really overcome the setbacks. They start to place blame, they make excuses, and overall it will limit achievement.
Yeah, so enough about this downer stuff. Let's focus on the positives of the growth mindset. So just as in the fixed mindset, your failures do define you, the good news is with the growth mindset, your failures don't define you. Not to say that they still don't hurt, but if you can change and grow, then there can be many different paths to success. And there's also the transformative power of effort. It's not necessarily what you achieve that's important, but it's the effort that you put into it in order to get there. And you can learn through your effort. And this means that smart and hardworking are not mutually exclusive. We happen to live in a society that praises effortless achievement. And this is classic fixed mindset, that people with a fixed mindset avoid effort like the plague because their biggest fear is to try and fail. But with a growth mindset, there's nothing wrong in trying and failing because you can try and try again. And this also means that you can turn knowledge into action. So recognizes the value of learning and of the ability to apply that learning and be able to grow in your skills.
Yeah, people with the growth mindset are a lot more likely to fulfill their potential because they're not held back by negative thinking or a fear of failure because it's not going to identify them as a failure. This encourages development and change, and you don't even need to be confident to do this, really. I mean, you just need to be willing to take the risk and put in the effort, and growth will happen.
That's exactly right. So now that we've covered the basics, we're going to go ahead and dive into some examples. So our first example of the mindsets in action is students. Liza, you mentioned earlier that you were talking about your mindset with school. What did you think about math?
I didn't like math.
And why was it that you didn't like math exactly?
I wasn't very good at it, actually. I was very good at reading and writing, but not so good at math.
And so what was the result of that?
I was just not doing it. I just didn't do long division. I drew pictures
instead of trying.
Yeah, unicorns all my math homework.
Exactly. So that sounds about right. Students with a fixed mindset, their main goal in school is to exert as little effort as possible. It's also known as the low effort syndrome. They're not trying in order to protect themselves from failure. This also means they don't bounce back as easily from failure or when they get a poor grade because they see that poor grade as meaning they are stupid. And it limits their achievement because they're afraid to try and take risks. Now, students with a growth mindset, on the other hand, what are they like, Liza?
It's like a little brain lifting weights, getting stronger.
That's exactly right. They're exercising their brain. They see school as an opportunity to learn new things and to keep trying, and they take charge of their learning and motivation. They study to learn, not just to get an A on the test. Again, it's about the process and not just the end result.
And there actually, Dr. Dweck mentioned several examples in the book. She has whole sections on students in business and sports, so we encourage you to check that out because she does a deep dive into this. All right, onward.
All right, so let's take a look at our next example. Parents and teachers. So you might recognize the teacher on the left from Matilda, Miss Trunchbull, and she was the first teacher that came to mind when I was thinking about a fixed-minded teacher. And she, I mean, for one, she had a reign of fear, and she discouraged her students and terrified them. But some other characteristics of fixed-minded teachers is that they don't really believe that they have an influence on their students' intelligence. They basically think that they decide off the bat who's dumb, who's smart, and it's typically based on stereotypes. And then they have this judging atmosphere of treating their students as such throughout the rest of the school year. Now, teachers with a growth mindset, like the oh so wonderful Mr. Fihihine.
Boy Meets World.
Boy Meets World, I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
That's true. They believe in the growth of intellect and talent, and they're fascinated with the process of learning. They give children honest and constructive feedback, and they foster an environment of growth and learning and interest in learning. So basically, they love to learn, and they want to teach their students to love to learn as well. And a great example of this that Dr. Dweck mentions in the book is Marva Collins. She took a group of inner city Chicago students that were definitely subject to a certain amount of stereotypes, and she treated them like geniuses. And as a result, she saw extreme improvements in their overall performance in school. Mm-hmm. And so for all my teachers in the house, who do you want to be, Miss Trunchbull or Mr. Feeney?
I think Mr. Feeney is magic. I mean, he taught first grade through college. He was like a dean by the end.
Yeah, I think the answer is pretty clear here, right? Mr. Feeney for sure. So the reason we grouped parents and teachers together is because they both really, it's the same concept, whether you're a parent or teacher, and how you interact with children. And Liza's going to touch a little bit on that in more detail.
One of the things Dr. Dweck mentions in her book is the dangers of praise, which is something that comes across as kind of weird because you want to praise your students and kids for doing well, but praising ability is a fixed mindset that can lower students' performance because they are constantly having to prove themselves. They're afraid they will live up to it next time. They have to pretend they're something they're not. An example of this is, you're so smart, you're so talented, you're a natural. It starts to teach kids that success equals smart, failure equals dumb. So they start becoming afraid to fail. They put a cap on things. They don't want to step outside that because the next thing they do could result in a failure. This can also lead to entitlement and a lack of effort, where kids just don't want to try. They want to really rely on that natural ability. However, praising efforts, a growth mindset, can raise students' performance and encourages them to keep trying hard. An example of this would be, I see how much effort you put into making that diorama. It looks like you spent a lot of time and work on it. This teaches students that what they're doing is something they can constantly improve upon and put more effort into, and that there's a lot of value in putting hard work into something.
Yeah, so for all the parents and teachers in the house, or if you have a niece or nephew or whoever, I encourage you to go out and try praising that child's effort instead of just their innate abilities, and let us know how it goes.
All right.
And if you're also interested in teaching students about a growth mindset, or teaching them the growth mindset, Dr. Dweck and her researchers actually came up with this Brainology workshop, and it's an interactive software that basically teaches children how to have a growth mindset. And you can check it out at www.mindsetworks.com.
We will send this link out later for you all to check it out too.
Yeah. All right, our next example.
One of my favorite sections is the growth mindset and fixed mindset in sports. So on the left here we have famous tennis player John McEnroe, and he is an example of a fixed mindset athlete. Tons of natural ability, but couldn't handle when things go wrong, and did not cope with setbacks very well. Fixed mindset athletes don't take control, they don't like to practice, and they rely a lot on talent alone. There's actually a pretty sweet video that we're going to chat out to you about John McEnroe. It's, well, sweet. He throws rather epic tantrums, as you can see. So we like his attire and his snazzy headbands, but his attitude leaves something to be desired. However, on the right side we have Michael Jordan. He was known for as a growth-minded athlete. These athletes find setbacks motivating. They find success from learning, improving, and not just winning. There's a focus on self-development. There's a lot of self-motivation and responsibility, and a lot of character. Michael Jordan, which Dr. Dweck mentioned in her book, he was cut from his high school basketball team. Didn't make varsity. And he spent a lot of time going outside, practicing free throws, layups, early in the morning, before school. And we all know how that turned out. But at one point in his career, he even mentioned, you know, I missed 71 game-winning shots. So he was not afraid to talk about failure and to improve upon it. And as a college athlete, I played water polo. I wish that I'd known about the growth mindset sooner, because I took failures very hard when things went wrong. But,
me too, Liza, me too.
Yeah, with curling? And
yep,
curling
with my curling. Anyways, so let's take a look at our last example. Mindsets in action, business and leadership. So you can see these are two very iconic brands up on the screen, companies on the screen, Enron and General Electric. So when it comes to mindsets in business, the mindset starts with the leader and trickles down to its employees. So some characteristics of a fixed mindset leader would be somebody who is larger than life. They have a really big ego. They believe in elitism. Remember the CEO disease that I mentioned earlier? That's them. And they hold innate skills to high esteem. So they're constantly looking to hire people with innate talent. They aren't interested in growing their talent. They want them to already have it. And they also don't self-correct. They don't acknowledge their deficiencies. Instead, they blame others and make excuses. And they're very brutal bosses. They ignore the needs of people below them, and they will even make people look bad in order to make themselves look better. So a great example of a fixed mindset leader was Jeff Skilling, who was at one point the CEO of Enron. And he was so confident in his abilities that he claimed profit on his ideas before they were even profitable. So basically, he thought, not only does my genius validate and define me, it validates and defines the entire company. And we all know how that went.
On the other hand, we have GE and its leader, Jack Welch. These leaders don't constantly try to prove that they're better than others. Instead, they constantly try to improve. They have a very high belief in human potential and development. They use the company as a vehicle for growth and not just for their own personal greatness. There's a big emphasis on teamwork and not just the royal I and me. And they keep lines of communication open, so lots of ideas are coming from different levels of the company. Jack Welch for GE took the company's valuation from $14 billion to $490 billion in 20 years. He's a manager who's committed to employee development and hired for more than just talent. These managers have a zest for teaching and learning, and they're open to giving and receiving feedback. At one point, Jack Welch received a review from a superior when he was early on in his career, and it pointed out some of his deficiencies. Instead of taking that, starting blaming others and, saying, oh, I need to fix this, he really took that to heart and thought, I need to improve on these things. He was someone who constantly valued learning and changing, and he's written some books himself on being a great manager.
Yeah, so, when it comes down to it, I'd much rather work for a growth mindset leader than a fixed mindset, wouldn't you?
Definitely.
All right, so
now for the big reveal, the 3 ways to change your mindset.
Here we go. Let's take a look at number 1. The first way you can change your mindset is by learning about the mindset. So basically, you guys are already one step ahead, but make sure that you're aware of your mindset and try your best to keep that in mind at all times.
Ask yourself questions when things come up. Am I being growth-minded here or fixed-minded here? And usually you can identify it. It's pretty easy once you know the classifications to pinpoint those areas.
Exactly. All right, and number 2, take charge of your brain. So by choosing a growth mindset, you now know that learning and effort and all of those things can result in you can change, you can grow. So make sure that you do that you never stop learning, practicing, and trying. Put in the effort. And lastly, have a plan and see it through. One of the things that Dweck mentions is that mindsets aren't permanent. You constantly have to make a choice to actively pursue and maintain a growth mindset. So make a vivid, concrete plan and hold yourself accountable. As Dweck puts it, mindset change is not about picking up a few pointers here and there. It's about seeing things in a new way. So now we're pretty much at the end. Liza, how would you say your experience was after reading this book?
Initially I think I went into it with some skepticism, but Dr. Dweck is a psychologist at Stanford, and so I figure they probably hire people who they know their stuff. So reading the book, I thought, okay, there's some things that I feel like I stopped too early on that I didn't proceed farther into because I thought I wasn't good at it. I always wanted to learn how to code for computers, but I was like, that's complicated. I'm an English person, I don't do that. And decided I was going to take a class. So I did, and now I have a certificate for 60 hours of completed coding. I wasn't a prodigy by any means, but I learned a lot. I kept searching out, asking questions, Googling things, and I can now make an email.
Yeah, she helps us code our emails, so I love it.
And you, Michelle?
I think that the biggest takeaway is going to be how I approach sports in the future, and particularly golf.
Not curling?
No, truth be told, I am not a curler, but I am a golfer. And
similar, right?
Golf is a very mental sport, and I think that now, in the past, I've taken one bad shot and let that define my entire game, and now I'm going to see a bad shot as an opportunity to hit a better shot next time and see how that goes. So if you guys are interested in following my golf game,
follow her on Twitter.
Follow me on Twitter. I'll tell you all about it.
Okay.
All right. So that's the end of our presentation, and now we're going to jump into the Q&A. So if you guys want to go ahead and submit some of your questions.
This is a very long question.
Let's see. Here's a question. What do you mean by having a plan and seeing it through? So what we mean by having a plan and seeing it through is that if you want to have a growth mindset about something. So for example, Liza decided she always thought that she wasn't able to code or do anything like that. So she said, I'm going to try coding. But she didn't just try coding.
I did it first.
She
didn't go so well.
She set a plan. She signed up for a class. She said she was going to complete this class, and then she was going to move on to step B. And I think that it's just the same whether it's in your professional life and you're a teacher and you're teaching to students and you want to teach a growth mindset, you have to implement growth mindset activities into your lesson plan. Or if you're a business owner and you want to have a growth mindset in your company, then you need to make sure that you plan to have constructive feedback with your coworkers and teamwork activities and things like that, so that it's integrated and you're constantly reminding yourself of your mindset.
I think accountability is key too, which is what I found with taking the classes. I want to learn this. What do I need to get there? And who's going to hold me accountable to make sure that I am learning these things and I am improving upon this? And who's going to encourage me? Because there are times when you do fail, you need that support network who's going to say, hey, you know, I failed this new thing I'm trying, and your good friends and colleagues will say, you know what, you've got this. You can do it.
Yeah, and we actually did a thing here at BookPal where we wrote out our goals, our professional and personal goals for the year. And one of the things that we're doing is having accountability partners to make sure that we fulfill those goals. Because, I mean, it's not easy to hold yourself accountable. So if you can have a mindset buddy, then I would definitely recommend it.
Oh, yeah, awesome.
All right, let's see, we've got another question that just came in.
This is, how do you avoid the pitfalls of possibly over-applying a growth mindset to areas where our natural strengths do not lie, rather than focusing and growing on areas of natural strength? I think this kind of goes along with the having the plan thing as well. You really want an honest assessment of yourself. Ask the people closest to you.
Well, I think this is a great question, actually, because I don't know if those of you in the room have read StrengthsFinder or know about StrengthsFinder, but the whole concept of StrengthsFinder is to find out what your strengths are and then to continue to grow them rather than to focus on your weaknesses. And what having a growth mindset doesn't mean constantly focusing on your weaknesses. What it does mean is that even you can improve your weaknesses. You might not improve your weaknesses as fast and as great as you can improve your strengths. So it is important to know what your strengths are and to continue to grow those, but that also doesn't mean that you can't do something just because you don't put your mind to it. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I think that Michael Jordan has more natural talent when it comes to basketball than I do. But that doesn't mean that I can't teach myself to shoot 3 free throws in a row. I mean, right now I can't, and I would tell myself I can't, but with a growth mindset, and if I said I'm going to practice nonstop for the next 3 weeks in order to shoot 3 free throws, then I can do it.
Dr. Dweck also mentioned that I found very interesting when she says, and again, she's a Stanford psychologist, so I'm like, I took this to heart. She's like, yeah, there's a bell curve, really. Some people are going to be incredibly naturally talented. Some people are going to have a lot less natural talent, but she kind of hypothesized that most people can learn most things with effort. There's a differentiation between like people who are adequate violin players, people who are masters, and it's the level of practice, not the level of skill. So, you know, there's room for growth in almost any area. So I think of math, and it's like if I had applied myself maybe earlier in school, I might not have disliked as much or thought I was so bad at it.
All right, I think we have time for one more question before we wrap up.
And the last one is, as a society that has lose weight in 10 days with this diet or 30-day challenges, does the book state how long it would take to transition from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset? I think it's kind of different for each person. It's sort of an ongoing process. With me and the coding, as soon as I read the book, I was like, huh, well, this psychologist from Stanford thinks I can do this. I think I'll give it a try. So some things transition really quickly, and some things I think take more time depending on the area that it's in.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways, some mindsets, they say it's hard to get out of a fixed mindset. She talks about it in the end of the book because especially if you've had a fixed mindset your whole life and that's how you define yourself, and then all of a sudden we're flipping your world around and saying, no, that actually doesn't define you, that's not easy to overcome. So it might take some people more time than others.
You have to want the change and want
to get over that. Right, but you have to make a constant effort towards it because it's not going to come naturally necessarily. But so I think kind of to Liza's point, it depends on the person, but it also matters in how much effort you put into it.
I still don't put effort into long division, so that really hasn't changed much. But
yeah,
I have an iPhone.
All right. So lastly, someone just messaged us. They said you were talking about a book this whole time. What's the title? The title of the book is Mindset, the New Psychology of Success, How We Can Learn to Fulfill Our Potential. And if you have any more questions or would like to learn more about the book or want to provide feedback on the webinar, please contact us. Here's our contact information on the screen.
And that's it. Thanks, everyone. Bye.